Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Global Café, live from Toronto. Today we're broadcasting here this amazing session. Just please be reminded that this session is being recorded. It's also being live streamed on our Facebook channel. The recording will be available in our website in the upcoming days. And if you have any questions or comments, please make sure to use the chat function along the bottom of your screen. And today I have the honor and pleasure of moderating this session with Dr. Andrzej Klimczuk and my colleague Luana Konago at the communications team at IFA will be moderating the chat function. So this is an intriguing session because Dr. Klimczuk, Andrzej, and I started talking a couple of weeks ago. And in two sessions, we managed to amass 5 hours of conversation about aging, policy changes, knowledge, and many other topics such as silver economy, creative aging, and some of the key points of expertise in his study. And Andrzej is a public policy expert. He's also a sociologist. And he's got a very extensive list of articles, papers, books published. It will be all available in the chat, and also his bio, which I'm not gonna read today for the sake of time because I think he has a lot to say. I just encourage you all to please click on the links provided in the chat. They're linking to many of his publications and also his webpage, which is impressive. And it's one of the reasons that made me invite him for today. And without further ado, Andrzej, if you could please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background in gerontology and how you came about studying, researching, and writing about creative aging and the topics we're going to talk later.
Okay. Hello, everyone. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this presentation without the presentation, as we agreed. Yes, and before I start talking anything, actually, I have to underline that anything that I will say it's only my a private opinion. It doesn't represent any opinion of any of the institutions or organizations that I'm related with. So I have to underline that. So my name is Andrzej Klimczuk. I'm from Poland. So I have the PhD from public policy, actually. And I work as an assistant professor at the Warsaw School of Economics in Warsaw, in Poland. So my background, the first one is the sociology. The second one is actually the public policy. But for the most of the time, actually, I do the research on social gerontology and aging policies, or the public policy on aging. And yeah, and how did I get to these studies on aging? We have this conversation with Bruna already. To make it short, like in 2005 or something like that, I observed a conflict between some of my neighbors raised by actually the death of older person. So actually the conflict started after the will / let's say testament of dividing the land between the children, basically, of this person. So for me as a sociologist, it was very interesting, although it was not a funny situation, let's say, or nothing positive to see the conflict, but it was interesting to observe how the person who was not visible that much actually started being, let's say, more important after the death. Actually, that was a little bit weird, and I realized at that time that actually the older people are not visible that much in Poland in public space. And later on, so I started doing the studies for my master's degrees at that time. So I dig around through the whole literature that we have at that time in Poland, which was not that much, to be honest. And I was a little bit surprised that we already have a lot of literature on aging in 1960s, 1970s even. From the demographic reasons mostly, with the warning signs. And I was like, oh my God, so it's something is happening with the population change, but we are not doing much about it. So of course it raises me like a question that it's related to our future. And that was weird as well, a little bit tricky thing, because even now when I look at the conversations on aging, people quite often, let's say, underline that the aging is like a problem or challenge that will happen in the future, that is not happening already, but it will happen. So it will come for us. It's not already ongoing, but it will be in future. So we are basically delaying the focus on resolving the challenge for some time in the future. So it's kind of strange logical game that we play as a society, I think. And then I realized that actually, at least the literature in Poland from 90s, because that was available for me when I started studying on that, was let's say, apocalyptic. It was not like the aging of the society is anything good that will happen, but it will bring us collapse of the economy, society, and healthcare, and anything else basically, that it will destroy everything. So I was like, what? How is this possible? Like, like all those older people can destroy the world? It sounds like nonsense. I will try not to swear, but that was like really nonsense. And at the end of 90s, at least in the Central Eastern Europe, a lot of countries started doing the reforms of retirement, let's say, of the social security systems. So when I was young, actually, we still have these advertisements in television that if you invest your money into private, let's say, social security funds, then you will have this better future on the retirements with the palms and drinking drinks on the beaches, something like that. I'm not kidding. There was the advertisements like that at the end of 90s in Poland, with the bright future that will happen actually. So it was a little bit contradictory, let's say. So on one hand, we have this like a gloomy future in the literature, the scientific literature, and on us in the people's heads basically. And on a second hand, we have this like a amazing future that is coming for us on our retirement, only if we change the pension system, which we are still changing actually. So it was a lot of contradictions. And coming back to my reason actually where I started it. So if the older people are not visible, then I was thinking, oh my God, so maybe they are visible, but we don't, like young people or the middle age people don't see them. So I was thinking, let's check what are the contributions of the older people in the society, in Poland at least, and are they collaborating between each other or not? As a sociologist, I focused on the social capital basically from the beginning of the older people. And this actually leads me first to the studies on inequalities between the groups of older people, like the people who are, for example, active in the universities of the tiered age, which are very, very popular in the Central Eastern Europe, and the groups of older people, on the other hand, that are like in the nursing houses or any other, let's say, total institutions that are closed institutions and are not visible to the rest of the people. So of course, like two different poles of comparisons and two different types of like a social networks that we have.
So sorry, let me just make a pause there, because you touch upon so many interesting topics there in a very short amount of time. Inequality. I think the key word there is inequality. You talked a lot. I love how you went back to the story about seeing your neighbors go through this, because this is something that I've seen, that I'm sure a lot of people have seen. Feel free to comment on the chat box if you have either been through or seen the situation in which a person it becomes more important or more relevant as something happens, like death, and then there's this whole legacy and the economical aspect of it involved. So that's I believe that can vary. That can vary from between societies, from social class and whatnot. But it's a key component. But also this inequality in terms of, well, there are people that there are older people that are active and functional and are contributing, and there are people that lack that because of several reasons we're going to talk about, lack of healthcare or education or access to it. And you said something during our conversations about inequality in aging and inequality in knowledge.
Yeah, maybe.
And my question is, do we want to know what it's like to get old? Or do you think that society is prepared? Because you said, oh, in one hand, you have this very gloomy future portrayed in literature. And then in advertising and in media, you see like, oh, let's have drinks and let's go on a cruise and let's have fun. So it's very, very different. There's a huge gap there. How do you see it? Do you see that is society ready to understand and to see and to know what it's like to get old? How do you see this?
Maybe we will come back to this like a more detailed options on the inequalities in aging later again, because that was the scenario, let's say. But to briefly take on that actually. As we have been talking, actually, the like a basic, at least from the sociological perspective, let's say, like a basic thing that is problematic, let's say, is the language that the people are using, right? Because at least in Polish language, for example, a lot of words that the people are using for aging and older people are quite brutal. I have to underline, it's not equal language already. Even if we don't think about ourselves that we will be old at some point of time. So it's a tricky thing in the language already. Of course, as we also spoke, not all languages in the world are the same. So maybe there are some languages that are without this like bias. But anyway, like when I started my studies on aging in Poland, so it was like in 2004, 2005 already. So, a lot of people have, now I will try to translate because it's hard to, it's a similar situation like in English when you have the word elderly or the elderly, and it already implies a little bit ageism. Let's say, so it's not like older person also, or the people, older citizens, etc. So we have something like that in Polish as well. So, already from this point, you feel this language stigmatizing a little bit. And the second thing, the same like the pensioners and retirees, like not all the people 60 plus, for example, or 65 or 70 plus are retires, right? But in the heads of majority of the people probably, they are, right? Because the age could be defined from various perspectives, like the economy, demography perspectives, like a social, psychological, etc. Right? So it's not equal meaning of the 60 or 70, etc. So it's like a basic knowledge that we have in gerontology, right? But anyway, this language of ageism or the age discrimination is available everywhere still. Not only like this apocalyptic demography that I mentioned, but also like a grace, tsunami, etc. So we know that already. Recently, because we also talked about that before, like the language on the longevity actually is one of those things that it's already tell you that if you live long, if you have this bright future actually, but it's nothing new in that because it's related to like a promotion of anti-ageism industrial stuff like cosmetics, beauty products, etc. So it's nothing new actually, it was before already.
It's very interesting because the studies, as we talked about in previous conversations, there are studies that were based on previous studies, like people get references from those old books, studies, groups, and research that was done a while ago. And then you, as you mentioned, you say something like that longevity is not a new term. It's something that's been going on. It was first used for the cosmetic industry, maybe, or something else even earlier on, and today it has a different meaning. So how do you see that this changing in and how it relates to policy, this approach to how we study, how we obtain data, how we understand what's going on with the society in terms of aging? Because you've mentioned there's a difference in using references from the past and also adopting new models. Artificial intelligence, one of them. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's another story a little bit, because we have these like traditions of resolving the social or public issues, let's say, or problems. But one of the things is that actually a lot of people still think that the aging is a problem. That's the language matter again. While I, for years, repeating and repeating that it's a challenge, it's not a problem, which is hard to get to some people still. And as we already talked, actually, this inequality of knowledge on aging, it started from the, let's say, quantitative data already. Not all the countries have the same statistical systems, for example, or the capacity to, let's say, process and collect and process the big data basically on aging. And in the recent couple of years, last couple of years, actually, we have plenty of these promotions of the technological fixes, let's say, for aging and technological innovations, which are not directly related to aging sometimes, at least not in a statistical perspective. And it's not taken into account into aging policies, right? That's the one thing. And the second thing, not all the countries in the world have the aging policies, right? So, and even if they have something, it could be of various quality. In one country, it could be like a 20, 30 pages, let's say, document that in, let's say, analytical perspective of the public policy don't have any meaning actually, because it's only phrases or buzzwords, which doesn't lead to any like a measurable goals or activities, not even mention evaluation of that, or monitoring and evaluation, let's be honest. And in other countries, we have something that could be continued, right? Or at least implemented or continued. So already from this perspective, even if we don't go that far with the artificial intelligence, etc., it's already inequality. But we can go to the inequality later again.
Let's talk a little bit about the silver economy, because it's one of the topics of today's conversation. It's a term that I hadn't heard before, but not with those words. But it's something that we see, not with this particular name, maybe across different societies and countries, but it's something that we see. Marketing trying to monetize on a particular demographic and target their products and services to this particular audience. How can you tell us a little bit about the silver economy?
Yeah, that will be a very concise story, let's say, because of course, if you want to go deeper, then you have to read a lot about that, how that happens. So let's be quick. So like the silver market, not the silver economy as a term, appeared in 1970s in Japan. Of course, like Japan is like a, let's say, a case of these countries that are like the avant-garde of aging for years, right? With all the inventions, etc. And at the beginning of this century, in 2004, 2005, actually, there was a senior network, senior at, let's say, network, the Silver Economy Regions Network. That was a project co-founded by the European Commission. And in 2005, in Bonn, there was a declaration on the development of the silver economy. In 2007, the European Commission in the documents like the Eurostat basically reports, later on also European Council created, let's say, a definition of the European, let's say, silver economy approach, which could be summarized like creating the emerging economy model that we focus on production, let's say, and distribution and redistribution of goods and services for the older people. And I'm always adding that that's a little bit narrow, that it's also for the aging populations. So then you have also the intergenerational component, because otherwise you will have to focus only like 60 or 70 or 75 plus, but without younger people. But the tricky thing is, so that all the people probably who are doing the research on the silver economy know that a lot of these products and services in the silver economy are not only directed to the older people, but they can be, let's say, universal due to the design, let's say, and used by everyone in every age, right? Like, for example, that's one of my examples that I give to the students. Like when you have the cup, it could be both designed like for the people with dementia, let's say, or like advanced Parkinson's disease, let's say, or any other disease basically. And it could be also for the small children, right? So it could be the same device, let's say, or same tool. From this perspective, it doesn't matter that much who will use it, right? Because it's a matter of design rather. And of course, this definition that the European Council created was, it's not a law, it's not a regulation that forces the countries in Europe to implement the silver economy. It's a strategical recommendation. So they can do that, but they don't have to. That's the point, the member states. So at least in my interpretation, the silver economy is like a kind of policy tool, and at the same time, horizontal policy that it's aimed at putting the elements or at least focus on the aging in every possible policy sector and industrial sector that we have, basically. So not only focusing on, like, for example, social policy that was going for years, or the retirement policy or pension policy, but going across everything that we have: the transportation, housing, healthcare, cultural activities, let's say, learning, education, etc. So everything, right? So if you look at this from this perspective, then you can think that actually the silver economy is the example of something that is written in the United Nations documents as a mainstreaming aging, right? Because that's the technique of putting the aging into all the possible things. So similar as the gender mainstreaming, right? But in a different way. And there is explanation why is that, actually, because if you know a little bit about the, let's say, law in the European Union, the competencies related to health and social care, for example, are the competencies of the member states. They are not delegated to the European Union and the European Commission, for example. So they cannot do that, without asking member states. So the member states have to do that by themselves. So in this way of thinking, actually, silver economy is like a policy tool, very tricky policy tool that goes a little bit around. So it's based on an open method of coordination that we have in Europe. So if the member states don't do something, then we can like create the tricky tools like this one. So it's like a much more like a softened tool to provoke discussions, to provoke collaboration, etc. And in 2011, the European Commission created a lot of networks, innovative networks. One of it was the European Innovative Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging, sorry, the long name. But from 2021, this network is also called as a active and healthy living in the digital world. So it doesn't have the aging in the title any longer, but it's focused on the aging. If you go to the platform, the Futurium platform that have it there, then you notice that it's directly related to like things like the silver economy, age-friendly, etc. So it's there. So I think that's enough.
Yeah, but what you said, that it's a tricky way of placing or reinforcing policy change. From your experience in sociology and also in the field of public policy, do you think that this would help us to achieve actual changes in policy related to children? Do you think that when it comes to, you know, touching someone's pocket and making a difference in the economic scenario, do you think that that's the way, that perhaps that's the final resort when it comes to policy change, when we see so many challenges in health, in education, in other realms of society? How do you see that?
It's also a tricky question, because of course, if we as a citizens, let's say, or scientists, we don't have the power to change the legislation, and if you want, you know, at least in European Union, if you want to change, you know, the rules of the game, so that we will maybe not need this like a tricky policy tools like the silver economy, then we have to change the law, and nothing, of course, at the moment shows that there will be, you know, another like a European treaty. So, you know, we have to, let's say, think that we have these tools in the forms that we have. So in this, at least, legal framework, right? And someone at the Mark Benning, as I see on the chat, someone mentioned that it's like a longevity economy. It is. It's like the longevity economy as a term is sometimes used like a synonym or like an exchange word for the silver economy. It's nearly the same, but of course, the longevity economy focus on the longevity. So the fact that we will be living like longer, like 90 plus, etc. So we also have this conversation on the double aging, actually, that it will be like the costs of healthcare, long-term care, etc. of the people like 90 plus are getting faster, higher than the rest of the younger, let's say, older people.
That's an ongoing topic. I had the opportunity of take a course, and the title of the course was quite gloomy, and I apologize for that, but that's the name of the course. It was Death and the Afterlife, which is very intriguing, because it was about not only aging, but coming to the end of life, which is yes, it is gloomy, but it touched upon so many topics like policies and economics and whatnot. And I clearly remember how the professor said, the way that things are heading right now, people will need a lot of money to die, and to get and not only to die, but also to get to this final part of life. We're talking about 90 plus. We're not talking about, as you said, 60 from 70 or 75 plus, because yes, costs have been increasing. Lack of policy, lack of access to education, to health, and also problems that have not been solved throughout life. As you said, we only think about things, you know, after once we get there. So lack of policy, making sure that throughout the cycle of life, we're having good access to health and education to prevent issues, and that will open up to a lot of challenges, as you said, economical challenges and challenges in terms of not only in terms of needing financial resources, but also in terms of long-term care. Where are these people are going to be looked after, and all sorts of things. And I know that throughout your studies, you mentioned that it's a recurrent topic, the multi-sectoral approach, that this mix of different institutions, organizations, the public sector, the private sector, and looking into economy, health, education, and you know, making a mix and trying to combine forces to tackle this this wicked problem, as I've seen written in your papers. How do you see that?
yeah, let's say wicked challenge to be positive.
Wicked challenge, not problem, challenge. I'm sorry.
Yeah, actually, this like a multi-sectoral approach. You can call it in a various ways that the scholars are using, like mixed economy of welfare, or the welfare mix, or the welfare pluralism. So it's actually all the discussion as well. It's not something new that was just invented like 2 weeks ago. It's old thing. It was invented basically already in 19th century even. If you go into details, so basically it's focused on collaboration between different actors, different entities, organizations from different sectors. So like not only like in some countries are focusing, like let's say Sweden, right? Where you have like a dominant role of the public sector, but you have the countries as well, like the United Kingdom or Ireland or United States, where you have the dominant role of the private sector in care, for example, right? And in some countries you have the situation like in Poland or in Italy, where the dominant actually role in care actually is for the family, which is like a private but also not non-formal, right, sector. But also you can have the social and solidarity economy entities like the cooperatives or social enterprises, right? So then you see that you have plenty of different entities, actors that are there basically and are not playing with the same rules because they are in a different, let's say, legislation. So the idea behind this multi-sectoral approach is to, create the situation where everyone, can collaborate with each other to basically answer the challenges on aging, right? Not only, I have to underline again, not only related to care, for example, but also education, cultural needs, transportation, housing, etc. So of course, if you go into examples, like if you have the promoted from 2007 idea of the age-friendly cities and communities, right? So on the local level, you see this everything more in a bigger zoom, right? And you have the cities, for example, and in the cities, you create the public policies at the local level that supposed to have all these elements, all these features. And of course, the city cannot implement or intervene in anything, everything, let's say, alone. So you have to collaborate with other actors. You cannot, simply do everything alone from the town hall. It's impossible. So it's extremely complex, but of course, in the smaller scale, in the local level, you see that better. So we need that basically. We need development of the local policies with multi-sectoral approach, right? So of course, there are plenty of approaches like that already, but I have to underline that the fact that one of the things that is missing sometimes is the monitoring and evaluation. And it's not, the fact that we are developing some programs or schemes, but in the end, we're supposed to at least measure the impact or anything else, like any other outputs or outcomes of that. And sometimes it's missing, so nobody is measuring anything at the end. So on a paper, everything looks fine, and like let's say Bürgermeister, or however you call it, like president of the city can say that, yes, everything is fine, because we are implementing something. But when you ask about the numbers of the change before and after the intervention, sometimes, most of the times actually, at least in my region of the Central Eastern Europe, they cannot provide any evidence that anything changed because they are not collecting that.
It is curious because I think it's an ongoing problem. We see here at IFA, I had the opportunity to talk with several of our project officers and managers. And the challenge that they face when doing studies and research is that many countries lack this data. Yes, that they might have recommendations, as you said, they might have a paper that's saying everything looks fine or everything does not, but are they measuring successes or challenges? have you encountered a way to overcome this? Have you seen an example in which a particular society has been able to successfully address this gap in not only collecting but also publishing this data? Because it's something that should be accessible to everyone, right? I understand it's in the scientific realm, but society has a right. I mean, scientists, the way that I see it, they collaborate to the greater good of society. So society needs to have access to this information in an understandable language.
You know, if you go, to the, let's say, all the, possible, because we are in this situation that we have these like gigabytes of information every day with newsletters, new publications, new reports, anything else. It's like thousands of things around us, basically. So of course you can go and search for the best practices around the world. So maybe some cities, you can name it, like the Manchester, for example, in UK, right? That they are monitoring the situation at least, right? Or any other, but I don't want to give the good examples or the best examples because they will be biased already a little bit, right? Because it's best for who, basically, right? So to be honest, I don't know the answer for that. I don't know answer for a lot of questions that I'm asking for myself, basically. So the easiest answer for your question, not the obvious one, will be, of course, there are some countries in the world that don't have the problem with that. Like you have the autocratian countries like Russia, Belarus, or something like that. They don't have to measure the data like that because they are not democratic countries. So they don't have to control the information related to aging, and they don't have to share this with the citizens. So in this like a nightmare, let's say, situation, nothing have to be shared with the citizens, right? And nothing have to be dialogue or negotiations, etc. So, if you see that from this like a gloomy perspective, actually also the democratic countries and the local governments, let's say, or the regional governments, they don't have to share anything and discuss anything with anyone. So, of course, we are aiming, I think, the better standards that if we create some policies, programs, schemes, or whatever you call it, then you will be measuring this or giving some possibility co-product or co-create or collaborate at least with the citizens or anyone else. As someone mentioned on the chat, yes, don't forget about the older persons with their work.
Yes, I was gonna say we have
that's also like my example of the informal groups, that the people are basically providing the services.
Yes, so we have two, I think the comments are very related from Brendan Sherlock and Catherine Klein, that contributions for the societies. I recently heard, I think it was one of the conversations we had in a previous Global Café, that there's a term in long-term care that it's, I think I forgot the right term right now, but it's something related to informal work or informal labor in long-term care. And it can be seen as very disrespectful, and I agree with that, because it makes it sound like it's casual, that it's an afterthought, and it's not. It's unpaid, but it's a collaboration. It's a real effort from a family member or a friend or someone in society, and it's labeled as informal or casual. And yes, to the point of those comments from Brendan and Catherine, the contributions are huge, and I think that the thing is that they don't come across in data or relanguage to things that we've discussed before.
Yeah,
I do have a question.
Like we, for example, there is tons of literature and studies on emotional work and emotional labor, so it goes in the similar direction, right?
Yes. I do want to ask, because I see a fellow Brazilian, so I'm going to pull the plug there. Antonio Leitão has a question about the economy power of older people. So do you want to unmute yourself, Antonio, and pose your question?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. Andrzej, I follow your work since you started collaborating with Jorge Felix here from Brazil. So it's nice to talk to chat with someone we have been reading. But the point I've got to you is so we've seen in last years the rise of a buzz regarding the economic power of elderly cohorts, and at the same time, every marketing research that comes to us that is done here show that those individuals don't feel their needs are well addressed by companies. So my question is, what do you think companies should do in order to enhance their products, and how to do it if marketing professionals are not trained to understand those needs and desires in schools? What have you seen? What have you seen internationally that could help us to move forward?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And of course, again, I don't have the real easy answer for that, to be honest. You know, I see this situation a little bit like the whole a discussion or discourse on the longevity and silver economy is a little bit, you know, as I try to mention, that is a policy tool, at least in my interpretation. So it's basically delegating or outsourcing some of the job basically to the private companies by the states. So, or if you want to go further, delegating this to the citizens. So in this like a brutal interpretation of what the silver economy is, you know, the unpolite story will be that now it's time for you people to care by yourself, basically, because the states don't have the power or they don't have the infrastructure, you know, to provide you the services. So now you have to care by yourself. So in this like a very, very extreme, you know, discourse, also you can see the studies on the co-production or co-creation. Sometimes they go into this direction, that it's like a extreme case of, you know, delivering everything by the citizens. So it's lowering the costs for the states. And of course, we are aware for years about this issue that you mentioned, like that the older people, for example, don't want to buy the technologies that are offered on the market. That there is like this, I don't know the word for a second for that, like this gap of taking up the technologies basically. But nobody knows the answer, you know, because let's be honest, like a lot of these like new inventions or technologies are basically crap, right? And they don't solve any issues. They simply imply that you will resolve the issue by yourself if you use this magic tool or magic technology. And some of them, they are just like gadgets. So no, they are not resolving any issues. That's the problem, I think, in this, right? Well, Bruna, let's go further because we ran out of time.
I do want to address one point, and I want to take this opportunity to address Shmuel's question about COVID, which is an ongoing concern and a recurrent question from his side. We have COVID. We still have. We didn't have. We still have COVID. We have, as I'm not sure if people who had just joined us realize that, but. Andrzej, Dr. Klimczuk, is in Poland, which is 2 hours drive away from a war that has been taking place, as other wars and conflicts that are happening throughout the world. So we have those very challenging situations, to say the least. And I would like your perspective on that related to creative aging, because I had a very interesting conversation with Dr. Shireen Hussain, who has previously participated in our Global Café. And she said something about her studies for refugees in the UK. The term that she used was a problem with lack of imagination, in the sense that people are growing old. They had, some of them had to flee their countries and go to these new places and learn this new culture and adapt. And despite all challenges, some of them were able to build this society within a society, right? And right now, what they see is that as they get older, their families are removing them from those places that they finally learned to become acquainted and familiar with, and take them to longer-term care houses, or even to live with other family member, because they could no longer take care of themselves. And so it was, she saw this increase, this despair, this gloomy aspect of it, because they could no longer imagine a future and the final years of their lives, because everything was moving, everything was changing so fast, and with all those rising challenges that we see. So how do you see that? How do you see creative aging related to that? And how could that possibly help the situation?
I will try to be very, very specific, because otherwise we will never end and go too much into different topics, because I will not comment on the war and refugee crisis and energy crisis, etc., because it's too much. At least in my publications, I was trying to focus on the creative aging at some point, because that was like one of the ideas that I noticed that it's not tackled that much, and not many people study that. Again, I will not go with the whole even concise story on that, because it's too much. Anyway, there is like this book of mine with 2 volumes, like it's hundreds of pages anyway, on the economic foundations for creative aging policy. To make it short, so I defined the creative aging, now I quote, as a process of engaging people in creative activity as they age. It aims to depart from highlighting problems of older people to instead indicating their creative capital. It connects arts with lifelong learning, community integration and rehabilitation, and therapeutic activities to improve physical and psychosocial conditions, build awareness, and promote the experience of older people, and then transfer it to the younger or future generations. That's the shortest definition. So, but in my approach, of course, the creative aging is like one of these strange buzzwords, because we have this discussion already. If you want to create any, let's say, public awareness or on any focus of the people or anything at the moment, as I said, we have this like tons of new data, new information every day, and the people are basically, distracted by so many things. Then you cannot basically create like any joint point without using buzzwords like in marketing. So you have to create the buzzwords like the silver economy or the creative aging. So the creative aging was already invented in the literature in 1950s. So it's like quite many years ago, let's be honest. So it's nothing new again. But the same as like in healthy aging 90s, active aging end of 90s, right? So we have these different ideas, different points that are focusing on something, some elements or features related to aging. In this case, the focus is on arts and cultural activities. And how is it related to silver aging, silver economy? It's not very simple, but let's say, imagine that you have 3 different circles. One circle is with the silver economy. In the second circle, you have the social and solidarity economy. And the third circle is the creative economy. So in the silver economy, actually, you focus only on the human capital of the older people and aging people. So basically, you focus only on the skills, and like the language, for example, or what the people can do, what you can teach the people. In the second circle, in the silver and solidarity economy, you focus on the social capital, on how the people connect with each other, how they collaborate with each other. And on the third circle, you have the creative economy. So you focus on a creative capital. So what the people can invent, basically, or create. The art is like an extreme example, because it could be anything. It doesn't have to be professional art, let's be honest, but it also contains the cultural capital. And as you can see in the sociological, let's say, theories, in Bourdieu, for example, the cultural capital is the tricky one, because it shows you that it's like an extra capital, because it controls the rest of the forms of the capital. So it's also called as a power of symbolic capital, or the like a power capital, let's say. because the culture is something that is hardest to change. So it basically influences how the societies collaborate with each other, like people collaborate with each other in societies, and it also influences what the people are able to do, like the human capital. So basically, if we are focusing only on the silver economy, then we are actually focusing only on the human capital, only on the fact that the people are getting older. So we are omitting the rest of the things. So I started, these studies on that only because at some point I was analyzing the Madrid action plan on aging, and I noticed that there is nearly no mentions on anything related to culture. Only like minorities are mentioned there, but the culture is not visible there. Technology is also not visible there. So basically, we are omitting these like a creative and cultural things there in the regulations and in recommendations. It's not there basically. Although now we have in this year like 20th anniversary of the MIPA, it doesn't change much. So it's not standing to the time basically. So it's already quite outdated because it doesn't respond to the world that we have around us with this discussion on the artificial intelligence, big data, or I don't know, like a robotics, automatization of anything that you can call a part of the industry 4.0 or for industrial revolution. So these things are not included basically in MIPA, and thus they are not recommended for the member states of the United Nations to be controlled or taken into account in relation to aging. That's the one of the things that I wanted to say here. So basically, it's already outdated. That's quite much. And on a second hand, we have this like a contradicting situation that a lot of countries, at least in European Union, are focusing on the technological fixes to aging. Not only like related to longevity, but also like automation, robots, and this like a technological use of ambient assisted living, or whatever you call it, aging in place 2.0 or whatever you call it. So it's thousands of buzzwords already for the new inventions, for the robots, not robots, smart houses, everything else, And the point is that we don't take it into account adequately in the public policies on aging. That's the one thing. And the second, nearly nobody's measuring it, although it's there. We are funding it in various programs already for years, but why we are not controlling what is happening later?
That's a question that I would love to see the answer. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and for the session. And before we get to the end and your final comments on the session, I would just like to talk about the upcoming session on Global Café. So Mr. Columlo is coming back, and hopefully it's going to be a very successful session. I want to appreciate all participants' comments and how they reached out to ask for Mr. Cullum to come and actually provide his lecture. So he's coming back next Friday. Please join us. And before I hand it over to you again, Andrzej, I would like to thank my colleagues here at IFA for supporting me during the session, especially my colleague Luana Konago, who has been assisting me with the session today, and also Dr. Jane Barrett and Mr. Greg Shaw for granting me this great opportunity to speak with you today. And also thank you all participants for joining us. And I would also comment on something that you said, Andrzej, that culture is hard to change. And that precisely because of that, it can be one of the things that might help in shaping policy. And as food for thought, I would just thought about giving an example. A lot of people know me as the storyteller because I keep this column here at IFA. And it's a buzzword, as you said. It's a buzzword, and it's not even a new one. It's a very old one. We've been telling stories ever since we came along as a society. And it all started 4 generations ago that I can trace back, because I had the pleasure of living up until my 18th birthday with my great grandma. So I got to experience life in 4 generations. And she was a storyteller. And I grew up listening to her stories and then listening to the stories of my grandparents, her daughter. And that has shaped me, that has influenced me to tell those stories. So despite all the gloomy aspects of our conversation today, I like how you ended with this, not because it gives me hope, but because culture has this power, and I live it. I'm living to tell the tale. So thank you for that, and I'll hand it over to you to conclude today's session. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me again. Thank you for all the questions on the chat. We tackled only some of them, I think. Like a final maybe comment. We didn't talk that much the issue of the inequalities on aging that much as we talked in our private conversations before, in the interview before that, actually. So maybe only one thing on that, actually. To be very precise, it will be good if we don't be such happy about all these social and technological innovations related to aging that are upcoming or already available. So as a scientist, at least, I think that we have to be very, very critical on that and very cautious, let's say, and see what is happening. So personally, I promote like a critical gerontology or even emancipatory gerontology. So that's the one thing. And the second thing, because we mentioned this like inequal knowledge, like we have this like a spiky word that you have some places in the world that have some knowledge, have some policies on aging, and some places in the world, some cities, communities that have no idea at all, or doing not much, and they think about social problems on aging, not the challenges actually. So, remember that the world basically in this term is not equal. So some countries and some regions are getting faster with inventing or resolving the issues on aging, and some are left behind. For our job, I think it will be good if we can, at least try to exchange the best practices quite better, because we are not going to easily change the legal framework. Either is this the Madrid International Action Plan on Aging, or any convention on aging, or any framework in the European Union or United States, etc. So legal frameworks are like this cultural capital, actually, which is not changing fast. So we have to think, in the same way as the European Commission think about the silver economy, to think around. So you have to be creative in thinking about aging. So basically, that's one of the things, to think around how you can resolve the issues in the current frameworks, but without changing the rules of the game that much. So that's the possibility. And yeah, maybe, we don't know the future. It's unbelievable to predict the future. So maybe we should remember at least that there is this like unacknowledged situation that may be like using the various scenarios actually approach in the public policies on aging should be promoted, because now it looks sometimes like copy pasted from one document to another one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to check Dr. Andrzej Klimczuk webpage and his books. They're very, very interesting. I had the opportunity to see them. I wish you all a great weekend. And thank you so much for attending the session. And thank you, Andrzej, for participating. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.